But Senator Peterson, the author of the income tax, I didn't know he was going to be there, but he was there. So when he walked out of the courtroom, we were ready to ask him some questions. And I got to give him some props because he didn't try and dodge or say that's not what today is about. We've seen that from some other politicians like Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson, who says, we're here to talk about this one single thing today, and you, reporter, can't ask me about anything else. He didn't do that. He stepped aside and granted me a short interview. And here is that conversation today with Senator Jamie Peterson. Center Square got a hold of in the income tax stuff. Any concerns about that affecting the case holding up when it gets to the court?
Nope. Not
at all. And any concerns about the the coordination between you and the AG's office trying to circumvent the voters?
So
on the referendum.
Two things. Okay. Number one is absolutely normal for legislators to consult with the Attorney General's office on bills. I mean, I hope citizens would want their legislators to consult lawyers before they draft laws, right? That's a completely normal thing. Second thing, the court has now said what we said all along, which is the referendum power does not apply to tax measures, period. It doesn't matter whether we put language in there or not. The point that Noah Purcell was making to me was that it becomes easier for the Secretary of State if the legislature has made that explicit. So originally, though, it seemed like the way the bill was drafted, it did not include anything about a referendum in there. Because it didn't need to. It didn't need to. Because it's a tax measure, Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution says it's not subject to referendum. It is, of course, subject to initiative, and that's what will happen now. But it is not subject to referendum. It doesn't matter whether we put that language in there. The only reason that that's important is because it signals to the Secretary of State what they should do. And without that, there would be potentially litigation about whether a referendum could be applied. But the court settled the question and said quite clearly that it doesn't apply because it's a tax measure. Okay, and then what about, as this thing is moving forward, you've got a lot of people, wealthy people, business people saying they're leaving. You saw the comments from former Governor Gregoire a couple of weeks ago at the AWB Summit. People saying they're getting the heck out of Dodge. Are you concerned this isn't going to bring in the revenue that you hoped? Time will tell. So as you saw, Senator Peterson did not directly respond to my question when I brought up former Governor Gregoire's recent comments that, she says Washington government has a major spending problem, not a revenue issue, comparing her own, the size of government and the state budget when she left office versus what it is today. He didn't directly respond to that, basically just said, we'll see. At the end of the interview, you saw that. So, but again, props to Senator Peterson for being willing to step aside and at least respond to a couple of my questions. Now, as you know, if you've read any of our stories up at the Center Square Washington page or watched this podcast, we have spoken to many business owners and wealthy individuals who say it is the final straw for them. They are making plans to exit the state, take their business or shut down or sell their business, or at least relocate their personal residence to avoid the millionaire's tax, which again is 9.9% on income in excess of $1 million or combined household income in excess of $1 million. The income tax could be overturned by the people via initiative if, in fact, Let's Go Washington's measure makes it to the fall ballot. They have a short window of opportunity to be gathering signatures, out doing that now. There's also the legal challenge, of course, that's moving forward separately. So that brings us to item number 2 in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Americans for Prosperity is speaking out about Washington's increasingly what they call an anti-business climate, and all the job creators talking about leaving, or maybe they've already left, for crying out loud. My colleague Randy Diamond is today writing up an article about Starbucks today announcing
250 more corporate positions being eliminated. So these aren't folks that are going to make the move to Nashville. These are folks whose jobs have been eliminated. AFP, I should tell you if you're not familiar with Americans for Prosperity, they are a libertarian conservative political advocacy group, easy for me to say. They promote, limited government, free market economics, lower taxation, lower cost of living, all those kinds of things that if you're watching this, you might be ascribed to some of those values for yourself. Maybe could use a little bit more of that around here. But I want you to see part of my conversation with Heather Andrews. She is the Western Regional Director for Americans for Prosperity.
There's so many people that are outraged because over, 100,000 individuals and taxpayers and residents signed in opposition, which was a record, and lawmakers signed the bill anyway. To me, that's not leadership, that's defiance, and it's a fail. It's not a failure of democracy, but it's a failure to listen to it. When you have so many people who are not necessarily always engaged, but a record number sign in to voice opposition to something, yeah, and not to be taken seriously or listened to is, yeah, tragic. And I think this is, again, we're seeing what happened. They passed a record 9.4 billion in taxes last year in 2025, then added this 9.9% income tax in 2026. And the cumulative burden is now driving all of the people that are, the major contributors to the economy out of the state. It's accelerating the exodus. You're seeing, real business leaders leaving the state, from, photographers to, the best day spa to fintech companies to major tech companies. Just a wide variety of businesses are now saying enough is enough. I can't do this anymore. We can't afford it. And unfortunately, if you, look at history, this isn't going to just stop at millionaires. And that's what lawmakers are already admitting. This is going to hit everyone. And lawmakers are calling it a millionaire tax today, but ask them what the threshold will be in 10 years. And they've already, admitted, it'll drop. And so the foot is in the door, and history tells us exactly what's going to come next. With 1 in 4 Washington employers now actively considering leaving the state, which is nearly triple like the 8% rate from just like over a year ago, that's really scary. And people should be concerned, and state leaders should be concerned. The governor should be absolutely concerned, and especially Seattle. I mean, you're seeing incredible, a lot of exodus of people fleeing Seattle, going to other parts of the state to just escape the high tax burden and the regulatory burden.
And a reminder, Let's Go Washington has begun their signature gathering effort with a lofty goal of obtaining, they hope to get maybe 400,000 signatures with 45 days left to get those. July 2nd is the deadline to get all those signatures. They only really need a little bit more than 300,000 valid signatures, but to account for, some are duplicates, some are folks that, aren't registered voters. They need to make sure that they get, way over the minimum to qualify so that they can account for any of those that get tossed out. So that effort's going on right now, as well as the lawsuit filed by Citizen Action Defense Fund, led by Jackson Maynard, and then the 2 sort of legal powerhouses that have aligned themselves with CADF's lawsuit, former Washington AG Rob McKenna and former Democratic Supreme Court Justice Phil Talmadge. So that's moving along on one path with a hope of, finding the income taxes unconstitutional, at the same time that Let's Go Washington is moving ahead with their attempt to get a citizen initiative on the fall ballot. So a week after Let's Go Washington launched an initiative campaign aimed at repealing the newly passed income tax, The organization tells me today they have never had a response. This many people reaching out to them in this short period of time, just a week since they launched, saying, we want to be a part. How do I get petitions? How can I help with this effort? It's been an overwhelming response. I didn't get any specific numbers. They haven't released those yet. Simply to say they've had an overwhelming response, nothing like they've ever seen before. This is IP 26-645. That's the initiative number. The IP stands for Initiative to the People, 26 because the year is 2026-645. So their goal is to get at least 309,000 valid voter signatures in the next 44 days. So they had 51 days from launch date. We're a week in, so 44 days remaining. But really, their goal is to get a lot more than that. They want to get something close to 400,000 or so to account for duplicate voter signatures or people that are not registered voters and can't sign that petition. Those folks would get thrown out, or those signatures would get thrown out by the Secretary of State's office. So the goal is to get way more than you need to account for everything that gets invalidated. The Building Industry Association of Washington is partnering with Let's Go Washington, really helping them with the signature gathering. And I had a conversation this morning with BIAW's Executive Vice President, Greg Lane. And he explained to me why they are so motivated to be a part of this. He says it's not just about their Building Industry Association members, who are, many of them, impacted in their business capacity, but he says he has concerns for this eventually affecting all Washingtonians.
This is a position our members have had since, since this whole issue came up, and it's for a number of different reasons. The first one is we know that it's an economic development killer. People who drive this economy, who create jobs in this economy, are going to be moving from our state, and so it's just bad overall for economic development and job growth here in the state of Washington. So that's one big reason. We do have a number of members who it will apply to. It's not a large percentage of our membership, but there are some who will fall into it because of the way that it's structured with the pass-through through LLCs and the way businesses are structured. And the way that construction works is, projects often take multiple years to complete. And so for a builder who's, in an LLC, for example, and they're doing a project for 3 years, they'll lose money. They won't make any money for 3 years. And then suddenly, they'll sell the project at the end when it's all done, and that's where they'll make their money. So for, a couple years, they're making their money over a 3-year period. It, averages out, it's going to be, say $500 to $700,000 a year, maybe something like that. But they're going to get it all at once at the third year, and then they're going to get taxed on it because it comes in 1 year. And so they may not pay the tax every single year, but because of the way construction works and the way that the compensation in construction works, they're going to end up having to pay this tax. But most important is that we know that this is only the beginning. And, once they get the income tax, if the initiative doesn't pass and they're able to get it through the courts, and the courts say, give it its blessing, and it gets implemented, we know that number, that $1 million figure, is going to come down, and it's going to come down, and it's going to hit more and more people, more and more small business people over time, once they get that nose under the tent. And so that's the biggest reason why we're in opposition to it, is because we know that ultimately more and more Washington families and Washington employers are going to have to pay this tax over time. And so those are the reasons why we've opposed it from the beginning. And, this isn't new to us, and we're strongly supportive of the initiative. We will be actively working with Let's Go Washington to collect signatures and get it qualified for November.
Meantime, the Economic Opportunity Institute, in support of the income tax, told me last month that they support this as part of the solution toward correcting Washington's regressive tax code. So I asked EOI's Policy and Research Associate Annie Kuklik, do you have any concerns about whether or not this tax is constitutional. Of course, we have a legal challenge that was filed last month in Klickitat County Superior Court that is moving ahead. At the same time, we have now this initiative drive that hopes to be on the ballot this year.
That's going to be ultimately up to the courts to decide. It's not our role to determine that. You can look at the history of Washington and how it's been interpreted. You can look at other states and how property is interpreted, because ultimately it comes down to the definition of how you define property and income, and if income is defined as property. So it will be up to the courts to decide that. We are anticipating a ballot fight, right? People will have a say in determining whether they want this to stay or not. We don't know if that's going to come this year in 2026 or if it'll come in 2027 next year, but we're anticipating that.
And again, Greg Lane at BIAW, he said that they're hearing from their members and just his circle of influence that people are pretty upset about the way this income tax was passed during the 2026 legislative session. He described it as overwhelming frustration about how lawmakers pushed this through, attaching that necessity clause to make it referendum proof.
The overall negativity that I've heard toward the income tax, it's very similar to the gas ban in that sense, in that the public is really in opposition to this. And so I don't think we're going to see as many problems, and we're going to see a lot of just excitement and support coming out to sign the initiative and get it qualified for the ballot. And I would compare it very much to the reaction we had to the natural gas ban when we were out collecting signatures. We really didn't come up with a whole lot of that type of opposition that Brian faced with the other two initiatives. And I think the income tax initiative would be very similar to that in terms of public reaction. They really, I think, broke the public trust on this issue. And a lot of the reaction isn't, a lot of it, of course, is in response to just having an income tax, but the way they went about it, in really kind of thumbing their nose at the public, and the public opposition for an income tax also, I think, really fires people up, and it's going to be seen in the response to signing the initiative.
So from today, this May 19th, they have just 44 days remaining to gather those signatures. But again, Let's Go Washington told me today they've never had a response like this for any of their initiative campaigns in the past. So we'll see how this all shakes out in the coming days. Seattle City Councilman Rob Saka told my colleague, Seattle reporter Randy Diamond, Tuesday he is concerned. He's concerned about the recent comments from Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson, even though he is also a Democrat, perhaps not as left-leaning as the socialist mayor is. Very concerned about the comments she made, kind of dismissing the business and wealthy exodus, whether people have already left or said they're making plans to leave. So he is the second Democrat to be speaking out about this in the last few weeks. And he says, I really don't agree with Mayor Katie Wilson's approach to this issue, especially he was speaking to Starbucks. Headquarters are in his district in the Soto part of Seattle. So I want to share part of his interview with my colleague Randy Diamond. And he says not only is he concerned about, Starbucks leaving, and we had another report on that this week with them laying off another 250 plus corporate employees. But he's concerned that other high income earners are going to continue to leave Seattle and the state of Washington if they don't stop villainizing these folks.
I personally disagree with, the approach that I think we all saw clips of, but I am personally concerned that Starbucks is leaving, and what that means for our city's economic vitality, jobs, potential job growth or lack thereof, and again, what it means not only just for our city but for our region.
Now, Councilman Saka did not want to go after Mayor Wilson. My colleague Randy Diamond pressed him a couple times in the interview to say, you know, what do you think of her comments? And he was very careful to say, I don't want to attack her personally. She can speak for herself. But he said he has met with officials in the mayor's office. I don't know if that was the mayor herself or just her staff members to express his concerns. But he said he does believe the better approach at this point would be working with the business community and folks that have been raising some of these concerns about the mounting tax and regulation burdens that are driving people out.
I think we should work hard to not dismiss or trivialize the concerns of others, especially during a period of economic uncertainty and rapid change that we're experiencing now. So, yeah, I think we're really at our best as a city when we bring people together, when we work to solve hard problems collaboratively and build a city where businesses, workers, families, and communities can all thrive and all have a say in the conversation. So that's the better together story that I've long been telling and will continue to be a firm believer in. I do find it gravely concerning when any major employer picks up its crayons and heads to another play box and takes jobs with it. I happen to represent Randy District 1 in the city of Seattle, which includes SoDo, where Starbucks headquarters is. But there's actually a lot of cross-pollination between SoDo and another major part of my district, West Seattle. So SoDo is a industrial lands, maritime industrial lands. A lot of small, medium-sized businesses operate there, including Starbucks. And a lot of their workers live in West Seattle. So there's a natural cross-pollination between SoDo and other parts of my district. So in any event, yeah, I do find it concerning and you know, I'm concerned about jobs in our city and growth.
It was just a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to also interview Seattle City Councilman Bob Kettle, also a Democrat, but he shared very similar concerns publicly with me, saying, you know, kind of breaking ranks really with the mayor. They don't want to throw her under the bus per se, but they're very concerned about some of the comments that she has made and her waving goodbye to those who would, you know, flee the city or flee the state to escape the tax burden and the pending income tax if it's upheld in the courts and voters don't repeal it with the initiative that may qualify for the ballot this year. So interesting to have two Democrats within the last couple of weeks on the Seattle City Council speaking out in opposition to what the mayor has been saying.